After a self-imposed good night's sleep, I wake up refreshed and beaming, ready to face another day at N.E.G.M. After wandering out the front of our hotel to get some air, I wander in to investigate breakfast at the restaurant. Several of the participants are already there by 6:30, and among them I bump into my new friend Jack, a member of the youth contingent and recipient of a recent Amnesty scholarship. He seemed in even better a mood than I was. So Jack, you enjoying the N.E.G.M experience?
Yeah, it's day 2 and things are going great. It's a great experience, looking really forward to it. It's going to be a good day and beautiful weather, beautiful sun, and we're loving it.
Me too.
That's great.
Well, no time to waste. The bus leaves at 7:45 to take us back to the action centre. Today promised to be an even bigger day, with a picnic lunch at 12 noon, and there was also talk of a final dinner together back at the hotel for all participants. First on the agenda for day 2 was the information session for all voting delegates. As I said before, my title was that of an observer. There were also voting participants, known as delegates. These numbered 19, and were drawn from each of Australia's states and territories. As this early portion of the day was optional for observers, I wandered the New South Wales Action Centre and stumbled upon a group of youth delegates intensively preparing for a later section of the conference.
It's going well so far. The instant coffee is good. We just had a really nice breakfast. But yeah, the actual N.E.G.M's going quite well. Just putting together some questions for the board. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, see what happens.
Personally, how are you finding your first N.E.G.M? Is it what you expected it to be?
It's really good. I love the professionalism. I love seeing all the energy around the room. There are so many exciting and interesting people to come across. And yeah, it definitely inspired me over the last day or so.
After the break came an informative discussion on one of the major campaigns, the recently launched Demand Dignity campaign, aimed at tackling a range of poverty issues worldwide from the viewpoint of human rights and human rights violations. Sarah Marland, the overseer of the Demand Dignity campaign in Australia, and our own Rodney Dillon, himself an Indigenous campaigner, gave a talk focusing on our part as Amnesty Australia in this issue, as it concerns the plight of Aboriginal Australians living in poverty.
Like they've just got a garbage truck out in their thing there, and Macklin's made a big point as a press release that they've gave Utopia a garbage truck. 200 and something years later they've got a garbage truck, you know, and I think it's absolutely amazing, isn't it?
The plight of the Indigenous residents of the town of Utopia would be revisited later at our action and picnic at Victoria Park. Till then, the discussion continued as we learned more about the day-to-day realities and wider implications resulting from the Northern Territory intervention, and in particular the topic of the current policy of blanket welfare quarantining for Indigenous Australians living in certain regions of Australia.
What's happening up to date with the who gets to have income management done to them, for them? Is it a postcode basis, just so that everybody within that postcode has to do it, or a bit more about that, please?
You have to stand up so people can see me. It's by prescribed community. So when the intervention came in, they did it by region. It's not really, I guess it's bigger than postcode. And the regions were prescribed because pretty much they're Aboriginal communities. So it's, you know, any of these remote communities up here, there's 73 of them across the territory, and also in Darwin. And it's really, I think, one of the most interesting things when we were in Darwin, there was we were standing on a road, and one side of the road was predominantly Aboriginal housing commission, and the other side of the road was predominantly white housing commission. All the same issues across either side. One was prescribed, one was not prescribed.
I'm going to give you a report for 2009, the year in review, and many of the issues that I'm talking about have been covered by Clare yesterday and some of our presentations yesterday.
Next, it was time to hear the board's report for 2009. Then a discussion was given on last year's N.E.G.M resolutions and the progress made on last year's goals. The opportunity was also given for questions to be directed at the board, questions that had been written down and submitted a little earlier in the conference. At around 12 noon we wandered up to the nearby Victoria Park, had some lunch, and an action was conducted for Amnesty members and the wider public. I'll let Clare, the Tasmanian branch president, explain. So what happened here?
Okay, so what happened, we've just had a really exciting action. We let off some balloons into the sky, and it's basically about calling on the Australian government to honour the Declaration of Indigenous rights. And in particular calling on the government to consult with Indigenous peoples when they...
This is the prior and pre-informed consent
yeah, that's right. Yep.
guideline that we have.
Yeah. So it was really great. It's a beautiful day, and we've just let all these balloons off into the sky, and we've got all these great pictures of the Indigenous people that we've been working with in Utopia.
These are citizens of Utopia, for want of a better word?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're about to head into another afternoon of N.E.G.M.
Excellent. What is your feeling of satisfaction for how well Indigenous issues are being catered to or raised in the conference so far?
I think that it's gone along pretty well. It's an area that we haven't worked a lot in the last few years, and it's a thing that's got to be taken slowly to work with communities. We can't cover big areas like we'd like to. So we've got to be careful that we don't offend some Aboriginal people for just working in the intervention in the territory, when there's a lot of people on the east coast of Australia suffering and the west coast. So I think it's very hard, but I think the concepts of working on Aboriginal issues in Aboriginal country has come a long way in the last couple of years, and I think that that's the demand dignity is a very important part of what we're going to be doing in the next 10 or 15 years. So I see they are very important issues and have come along a long way, and have got a long way to go.
We made it back to the Action Centre at around 1:45, where we heard a fascinating and heart-wrenching first-hand account from a former prisoner of conscience from Bhutan, a fascinating and self-effacing individual named Ratan Gazmir. Later, in the second day's workshop session, I also heard from a courageous woman who was once a rape victim, now a campaigner and advocate for women's rights, as well as from a Sri Lankan refugee. All three stories were quite sobering, and from first-hand accounts we all gained a greater portion of clarity of some of the harsher realities that make up the real world, as well as in these cases, the not too infrequent reality of triumph over adversity. I leave you with a taste of our N.E.G.M dinner, held on this, the second last day of the conference, including the presentation of this year's June Facina Award.
I have a list, but I'll keep that to myself. So, my job at this stage of proceedings actually is to, it's a great honour, it's to actually award the June Facina Award. And you'll be aware, probably, that the June Facina Award goes to someone for their outstanding activism and contribution to the cause of human rights, and particularly to the work of Amnesty, just by way of themselves. So congratulations, Peter, and thank you so much for the work that you've done.